Today we're going to be taking a look at Adventures of Mana, which is actually a screen-for-screen remake of the very first Mana game, Final Fantasy Adventure, which was released on the Game Boy in 1991. It also incorporates elements from the previous remake, Sword of Mana, which was released on the Game Boy Advance back in 2003. While originally released on Android and iOS, it has finally made its way over to the PlayStation Vita, and the results speak for themselves. If you own a Vita, this is the ultimate version of the game and shouldn't be missed by both fans of Zelda and the Mana series alike. What I love about Adventures of Mana is that it's able to scratch that retro itch while incorporating new visuals and a reworked soundtrack that sounds amazing. Square-Enix built a brand new 3D engine purposely for this remake, as they intend to release all the Mana games on modern platforms for the series' 25th anniversary. While some may not like the new 3D graphics over 2D sprites, I like the unique style the game has and am eagerly awaiting the rest of the series. I would most certainly prefer the lush and beautiful pixel 2D sprites offer, but this new style has a certain charm to it. The new audio arrangements are fantastic and will have longtime fans very pleased by the end results. Quick question for you all. Do you like the original overhead Zelda games? If so, you're gonna have a lot of fun with Adventures of Mana. The gameplay is exactly like that classic series, where you traverse an overworld, visit towns, enter dungeons, and collect new armor, weapons, and spells in order to take out the evil Dark Lord of Glaive from destroying the Tree of Mana. The world is filled with maze-like areas that require certain items to bypass, such as an axe to cut down trees, a sickle to shear long vine growth, or a chocobo to access waterways and more. If you get lost, which can happen quite easily, you can make the most out of the newly included minimap, which is quite helpful to keep track of where you've been and where you need to go. For traditionalists out there, you can disable the map if you prefer to go it alone. Combat, as you would imagine, is quite simple, given Final Fantasy Adventure was originally released in 1991 and was released for the original Game Boy. It's quite a basic game. X is your one and only attack button. Combat is spiced up by the inclusion of different types of weapons, which are useful against different types of enemies. So for example, you may need to use the sword against a magic cloud of doom, and an axe against a heavy armored foe. There's a morning star, flail, sickle, and more. While there may only be one core action button, there are actually 4 buttons that can be used for, well, whatever you want. Circle can be used for a second weapon, a magical spell, or a useful item. You then have 3 on-screen touch buttons, which can also be used with traditional buttons if you so desire. R plus triangle, circle, and square, for example, and can also be mapped to either equipment, items, or spells. Adventures of Mana also features some RPG-light elements. Every time you gain a level, you can set skill points towards strength, intelligence, vitality, and mind. These stats boost things like how many hit points you have, mana points, etc. The game is also very portable friendly, with the ability to save anywhere you wish. As such, you can come and go as you'd like. Thanks to the fact that you can use buttons for everything on the touchscreen, this is the best version released to date. Being able to use the D-pad or the analog stick on top of buttons is so much better than having to play this on a smartphone where you don't have any buttons at all. Better still is that you have access to both options. So you can use, say, a couple of the face buttons and the D-pad, but then you can also use the on-screen touch buttons to quickly access additional items. It really is the best of both worlds. Added trophy support is a bonus, although the trophies are a little bit basic. The PlayStation TV is even supported, which is fantastic because if you're like me and you want to capture footage, it's a complete breeze to do so. And I hope more and more Vita games continue to follow in its footsteps. While the updated audiovisual presentation is welcome, it would have been nice to have gotten just a little bit more. For example, when you change armor, it's not represented on your in-game character. This means he'll look the same throughout the entire game, which is a bit unfortunate as there were only a handful of armor choices in the whole game to begin with, so it wouldn't have been that much work to have created just a couple of different character models. There are also several very old school gameplay mechanics that will likely annoy quite a few people and really should have been overhauled. Everything in the game resets the minute you leave one particular screen. Unless you defeat all enemies, they pop right back up the second you re-enter the screen. And this is true for locked doors or stones, which require a mattock to destroy. So here's a fun situation you can find yourself in. You're making progress in a particular dungeon only to run out of keys right before you reach the final boss fight. Simple, you just have to leave and go buy some additional keys in town located right by the dungeon. Well, not so fast, because as you're making your way out, you realize you don't have any mattocks left, so you can't actually escape the dungeon because all the rocks are blocking your path. So what do? You're essentially stuck. Thankfully, you can just load your last save game and you'll be outside the dungeon, where you can go and buy some more items. But this archaic gameplay design choice really stands out as something that could have very easily been changed today. It's not game-breaking by any stretch of the imagination, but it does get annoying when you forget to purchase one set of keys and, well, only discover it when you're about 20 minutes into a dungeon. Later on in the game, the Morning Star makes mattocks useless, and skeletons have a chance to drop keys, so it sort of balances itself out. But early on, believe me, take my advice, stock up on keys and mattocks so that you don't get yourself stuck. And what's a little bit unfortunate is that it's very clear the game was not optimized to run on the PlayStation Vita. If you put your system into sleep mode, the game's in-game timer continues to tick away, so don't be surprised if your save file tells you that you've been playing for 40 hours, when in reality you've only been playing for like 3 or 4. And all the extra Vita features are not operational while the game is running, which is extremely funny since full retail releases such as Freedom Wars, Uncharted, etc. all allow you to access the Vita's other applications, whereas this, a much simpler game, does not. Overall, Adventures of Mana is a fun game, but it certainly has some issues. One gameplay tweak could have made the game a bit more accessible to the masses, at least early on with the key and mattock issue, and the fact that the Vita port wasn't optimized for the system it's on is a little bit of a disappointment. That said, the game remains fun to play throughout the 8-hour or so adventure, and if Square-Enix is going to bring the rest of the Mana series to the Vita, I'll gladly say thank you and take my money. If you're a fan of classic Zelda games, the original Final Fantasy adventure, or are just looking for a solid action RPG, you could do a lot worse than Adventures of Mana.